What happens when a legend like Lewis Hamilton calls the FIA stewards a complete joke in the middle of an international broadcast? Today we are going to break down everything that happened at the 2025 Brazilian Grand Prix, where not only Hamilton's career collapsed, but also the credibility of the sanction system in Formula One. Is the FIA risking its reputation in every decision? It all started on Friday at the Interlagos circuit, with an atmosphere full of tension and unstable weather forecasts that predicted a complex weekend. For Lewis Hamilton, the challenge was not only to adapt to the conditions of the Brazilian track, but also to find a balance with a car that, until that moment, had not proven to be competitive. From the first tests, the SF25 showed signs of imbalance, especially in tire management and fast corner performance. But the situation became truly critical in qualifying for the sprint race. Hamilton was eliminated in SQ2, a round that traditionally should not represent major complications for a driver of his level. The reason? He did not manage to cross the finish line in time to complete a last fast lap. But what really set off alarm bells was the context of its elimination. In the final seconds of the session, double yellow flags were displayed for a spin by Charles Leclerc at turn 10. Although the warning lights were visible for a fraction of a second, the stewards considered that Hamilton, being an experienced driver and having a direct view of the stopped car, should have visibly reduced speed. Telemetry confirmed that he briefly released the accelerator, but did not slow down enough as required by regulations in these situations. The verdict? An official reprimand, his first of the season. There was no penalization of positions, but a worrying trend was evident. Decisions made with too wide margins of interpretation. This reprimand was just the preamble to what would be a weekend full of inconsistencies and frustrations. On Saturday, during qualifying for the main race, Hamilton suffered again with the SF25. Eliminated in Q2, he secured only 13th place on the grid. His teammate Leclerc, in contrast, managed to qualify third, which made it clear that beyond the car's performance, there was a deep disconnect between Hamilton and his new machine. The biggest difficulty was finding the optimal tire temperature window, a factor that has been crucial in modern Formula One, especially with the Pirelli tires of this generation. The SF25, with its weight balance and aerodynamic distribution, simply did not find enough grip on the rear wheels, a problem that caused the car to lose traction during acceleration and cornering stability. What was most alarming for Hamilton was not just the poor performance, but Ferrari's lack of quick solutions. The British driver repeatedly complained on the radio about problems with the car's grip and instability, especially in medium-speed corners. Despite the team's attempts to make adjustments to the rear wing and engine maps, the improvement was minimal. Time was running out, and the feeling of helplessness grew stronger. But even more frustrating than the technical problems was the feeling of operating within a system of arbitrary rules. During the previous sessions, other drivers had had similar situations with yellow flags or incidents on the track, without receiving any sanction. Consistency, or lack thereof, was beginning to be a recurring topic of conversation between the teams. And Hamilton, one of the most vocal drivers in the paddock, would soon express his discontent. What seemed to be just a difficult weekend turned into a pressure cooker. The Ferrari driver was on the verge of competitive collapse, trapped between an unpredictable car, erratic technical decisions, and a regulatory structure that seemed to punish without clear criteria. That storm of frustrations not only altered his physical performance, but also his emotional state. Every lap on the track was a fight against an unresponsive car, while off the track, the FIA offices seemed to act with an intolerable level of arbitrariness. The situation not only raised questions about the impartiality of the stewards, but also called into question the robustness of Formula One sanctions system. And for Hamilton, a driver accustomed to the highest standards of competition, this was simply unacceptable. What happened in Brazil was not simply a bad performance. It was the trigger for an open war between one of the sport's greatest champions and the institution in charge of regulating it. The tension built up throughout the weekend finally exploded on Sunday, when the main race of the Brazilian Grand Prix transformed, in a matter of seconds, into true chaos. What should have been an opportunity to save points and perhaps recover some of the lost ground, ended up being the most frustrating episode of the season for Lewis Hamilton, a weekend where Formula One stopped being a competition and became a technical, political, and regulatory game of chance. From the moment of the start, incidents began to occur one after another. In the first corner of the Interlagos track, Carlos Sainz, driving a surprisingly competitive Williams, found himself positioned poorly in relation to traffic and lightly touched the left rear tire of Hamilton's SF25. At first glance, it seemed like a minor friction, but for a modern Formula One car, even minor contact can drastically alter its performance. In this case, it was a loss of stability at the rear of the car. Hamilton immediately reported it on the radio. "The rear is not stable," a phrase that, in paddock slang, is synonymous with an unpredictable car, especially in traction phases such as corner exits or deep braking. This initial blow caused Hamilton to immediately lose 5 positions, falling from 13th to 18th place. In those first laps, while the group was still compact and DRS was not enabled, the Briton tried to make up ground. But then the second act of the tragedy occurred. On lap number 2, right at turn 15, one of the fastest on the Hamilton circuit met Franco Colapinto's Alpine. The Argentine, who was coming with less pace, made a slight error at the apex, and Hamilton, looking for a slipstream that would allow him to launch an attack on the main straight, took advantage of the slip. That was when the incident that would alter the rest of the race occurred. According to Hamilton's own version, Colapinto unexpectedly moved to the outside just when he had already started changing lines to make the overtake. The result: the right front tire of the number 44 Ferrari collided with the left rear of the number 43 Alpine. At first glance, a light touch, but the damage was enormous. The Ferrari's front wing was completely fractured, and part of its remains lodged under the floor of the car. This detail is key. In current Formula 1, the flat bottom and the diffuser are responsible for more than 60% of the downforce. Having loose parts blocking that area is equivalent to disconnecting much of the car's performance. Telemetry data confirmed that the SF-25 lost between 35 and 40 points of aerodynamic load after impact, a figure that transforms the car into an ungovernable entity. The rear wheels began to slide violently in medium and high-speed curves, the spoiler did not generate enough support during braking, and on long straights, the car vibrated to the point of compromising the driver's visibility. From that moment on, Hamilton became a passenger in a car that could barely stay on track. But the biggest blow was not physical, nor even technical. It was political. The race management opened an almost immediate investigation into the incident with Colapinto. After reviewing onboard camera footage, speed data, and acceleration records, stewards determined that Hamilton was fully responsible for the collision. And this is where the episode reached a new level of controversy. Although it was recognized that the contact was slight, that it did not cause the other car to abandon the car, and that the speed difference was minimal, it was decided to impose a 5-second penalty. A penalty that, although less than the 10 seconds required for this type of incident, was devastating given the context. The unusual thing was that this sanction came at a time when Hamilton was already completely out of competition due to the damage to his car. It was, in fact, a double sentence. Not only had he been left without options due to the structural damage to his car, but he was also receiving a penalty for an incident that many considered a racing incident. In other recent events, similar situations had not been penalized. The message that the British pilot received was clear. There was no coherence, there was no equality in the criteria applied, and the interpretation of the incidents was subject to unpredictable factors. Hamilton, known for his self-control, did not hold back this time. As soon as the penalty was announced, he responded on the radio with a phrase that would echo throughout the paddock. "These guys are a joke. A complete joke. The car moved on me, so I just touched the wing." It wasn't just any complaint. It was a direct indictment of the integrity of the FIA and its stewards. It was a visibly overmatched Lewis Hamilton, frustrated not just by the events on the track, but by a sense of pent-up injustice. And the most serious thing is that it was not an isolated case. Several pilots had been raising their voices about inconsistent decisions. But the fact that it is the 7-time world champion who speaks with such harshness and public exposure marks a turning point. The Brazil 2025 incident was not simply a misinterpretation. It was the catalyst for a much deeper conflict. The growing distrust between the drivers and the authority that should guarantee fair play in the premier class of motorsport. What caused such a reaction was the 5-second penalty imposed after contact with Franco Colapinto. Although the collision was neither serious nor intentional, the stewards concluded that Hamilton was fully responsible. The subsequent reaction was not limited to a phrase in the heat of the moment. After the race, and with the situation still boiling, Hamilton maintained his position. In statements to international media, he reiterated his discontent with the way decisions are being made in Formula 1. The FIA, for its part, responded with a technical statement in which it attempted to justify the sanction, appealing to the parameters established by the regulations. But his explanation, far from calming spirits, fueled the controversy. Not only because of his cold and bureaucratic tone, but because he avoided referring to the underlying issue, the growing distrust of the pilots towards the criteria of the stewards. The institution seemed more concerned with defending its image than opening an honest conversation about its own procedures. The 5-second penalty for the incident with Colapinto was just the last straw. What really ignited outrage was the accumulation of recent precedents where similar decisions were sanctioned differently, or even ignored entirely. When pilots begin to feel that the regulations are a flexible guide subject to changing interpretations, the credibility of the system breaks down. Beyond what Hamilton felt, the controversy unleashed in Brazil shows an inescapable reality. The FIA is losing its moral authority within the sport. It is no longer just a matter of correctly applying the regulations, but of clearly, coherently, and publicly communicating the reasoning behind each decision. In an environment where every thousandth is analyzed by millions of people, there can be no room for ambiguity. But there is something even more worrying. Hamilton's reaction has generated a domino effect. Several pilots, even more subtly, have begun to express their doubts about the sanctions system. Entire teams, such as Mercedes or McLaren, have asked privately and sometimes publicly for a thorough review of the referee protocols. The lack of uniformity, the lack of clarity in the interpretation of certain rules, and the frequent rotation of commissioners between races generate a climate of uncertainty that undermines the competitiveness of the sport. Furthermore, the current context of Formula One, where the fight for championships is more open than ever, turns each failure into a ticking time bomb. With several teams in a position to win races and such tight margins between the top places, a poorly applied sanction can define the fate of a world championship. And that, in a category that boasts technical and sporting excellence, is unacceptable. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.